You're listening to the Alpha's Love Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. The dove-gray silk of my gown felt like a funeral shroud, exquisitely crafted from threads of fear and submission. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the fabric. A slight movement I prayed would go unseen. Dressed identically, every Omega servant at the royal ascendance was intended to be a silent, moving part of the Alpha Court's backdrop, yet the frantic rhythm of my heart betrayed a different truth. We were not invisible, but prey. A thin, fearful whisper reached me. "Eyes down, Elara. Do not give them a reason." It was Lyra. Her gaze fixed on the floor, her own vibrant spirit eroded by years in this gilded prison. Lord Korbin and his men reek of violence tonight. They are hungry for sport. I promised I would be careful. The words ash in my mouth, but my memory betrayed me, dragging me back to a year prior. A dropped tray, wine on a lord's boot, and the silver-tipped lash that followed. The strike was not born of anger, but of a chilling indifference. He hadn't even looked at me. In that moment, I understood the true agony was not the physical pain, but the soul-crushing realization of my own insignificance. "Just survive the night," Lyra murmured, giving my arm a desperate squeeze before vanishing into the corridor's shadows. But as I stepped from the dim passage into the overwhelming splendor of the grand hall, a haunting question echoed within me. Was survival merely a slower form of death? The air was thick with the scent of alpha dominance, expensive perfume, and raw power. My own sweet floral Omega scent felt like a glaring beacon of vulnerability. My sole objective was invisibility. I moved like a phantom along the room's edges, my eyes locked on the floor, balancing a heavy tray of crystal goblets. I could feel the weight of their gazes, assessing, contemptuous, predatory. Then, my world froze. A calloused, iron-strong hand clamped onto my shoulder. I turned slowly, dread coursing through me. Lord Korbin stood there, a mountain of malice, a cruel smile twisting his lips. His guards, Brant and Silas, flanked him like vicious shadows. "Well, well," he grated, "a little lost, Omega." His grip tightened. "What's the matter?" Brant taunted. "Cat got your tongue?" Korbin chuckled. "She's a servant." "She has no tongue, only uses." He plucked a goblet from a passing tray. "And I think this vintage would look better on her than in a glass." Before I could form a plea, he upended it. A cold, shocking deluge of crimson wine soaked my hair. Face and dress, the fabric darkened to a bruised purple as laughter erupted around us. The sound was a worse assault than the cold stickiness. The shame was a searing brand. My tear-filled gaze, in a desperate, instinctual search, slammed directly into his. The king, Kaelen. He was seated on his obsidian throne, perfectly still in the shadows. He wasn't laughing. His golden, lupine eyes were fixed on me with a terrifying, absolute focus. He had witnessed my entire degradation. My spirit shattered. The tray clattered to the floor, but I didn't care. I turned and fled, a wine-stained ghost, not stopping until I collapsed in the cold darkness of the servants' quarters. Sobs finally tearing free. From his throne, King Kaelen watched the girl flee. The court's casual cruelty was a necessary evil, a performance for the sharks circling his rule. He had built his reign on a brutal truth learned from his father's betrayal. Mercy was a weakness he could not afford. Then a scent severed his thoughts. It cut through the perfumed air, wild jasmine and winter snow. A scent his soul recognized with primal certainty. Mate. His gaze narrowed, scanning the crowd with frantic intensity. He followed the scents to where Korbin had staged his spectacle. The beautiful fragrance was now tainted with fear and wine. A cold, quiet fury ignited within him. He summoned his commander, Garrick. The girl they humiliated. Find her. Take her to the sunken palace. She is to have every comfort but see no one. She does not leave. Garrick bowed. And if she asks why, tell her the king has taken a special interest in her well-being. As Garrick departed, Kaelen wrote 3 names on a parchment: Korbin, Brant, Silas. He stared at them, a silent promise of vengeance in his heart. The hunt had begun. Back in the servants' quarters, I scrubbed at the wine-stained dress, the humiliation a deeper stain than any wine. Suddenly, the corridor fell silent. The door creaked open. 2 royal guards stood there, their stone-like eyes finding only me. Elara, by order of the king, you are to come with us. A cold dread washed over me. This was my execution. Please, I whispered. I didn't do anything. They didn't answer, their presence a final command. They marched me away, not down to the dungeons as I feared, but up toward the palace's highest, most secluded wing. I was left to wonder which was more terrifying, the death I expected or the terrifying unknown that now awaited. The atmosphere shifted as we ascended. The familiar, clean sense of the main palace faded, replaced by the dry, still air of a place frozen in time. The hallways were lined with faded tapestries depicting ancient kings and forgotten wars. The only sounds were the guards' steady footsteps and the frantic rhythm of my own heart. This was not the way to an execution. This felt more deliberate and therefore more terrifying. We halted before enormous doors of dark, ancient wood inlaid with tarnished silver depicting a wolf ensnared by thorns. A key turned and the doors groaned open, revealing a sight that stole my breath. It was not a cell, but a forgotten dream. Moonlight filtered through a vast, grimy window, illuminating a suite of rooms lost to dust and silence. The air held the ghost of roses and lavender. Furniture stood shrouded in white cloths, and tattered silk drapes hung from tall posts. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly lifeless. A tomb. These are your chambers, a guard stated, his voice echoing. You will remain until the king decides otherwise. My chambers? Why? What is this place? The sunken palace, the other guard replied, the old queen's wing, sealed after the war. A shiver ran through me. The king had brought me to his mother's rooms. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows. Her back straight and her face a mask of stern judgment. I am Morwenna. I am to be your attendant. Her sharp eyes assessed my stained dress and disheveled state. By order of the king, this is your new home. You are not to leave. The contradiction was staggering. I was not a prisoner, yet I was not free. I was an object, moved from a small box to a larger, more beautiful one. Morwenna led me to a bedchamber and unveiled a dusty, canopied bed. She produced a nightgown of exquisite white cotton. "Change," she commanded, holding out her hand for my ruined dress. I complied, my fingers trembling as I shed the rough fabric that represented my entire life. Morwenna took it, held it for a moment as if weighing my very identity, and then tossed it into a cold fireplace like rubbish. A part of me wanted to scream. That dress, for all its misery, was who I was. "Why?" I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. "Why am I here?" Morwenna paused at the door, and for a moment her stern expression softened into something resembling sorrow. "Some questions, girl, are more dangerous than their answers. It is best you do not ask them." The door clicked shut, and the heavy bolt slid into place. I was alone. The silence was a physical weight, so profound I felt I might suffocate. Driven by a need to feel anything but this crushing isolation, I explored. My bare feet whispered across dusty marble. I found a library filled with ancient books, a music room with a silent piano, and a conservatory of dead plants. It was a gilded cage of unimaginable luxury. Time became meaningless. Morwenna brought exquisite food and beautiful dresses, but offered no answers. My initial terror mutated into a slow, creeping dread. What was the king's purpose? Was this a new form of torment? My only link to the outside was the muffled conversation of the guards. One day I overheard a fragment that froze my blood. "Found him in the training yard. Fell on his own sword. A tragic accident." "An accident?" a younger voice scoffed. "Brant was one of Korbin's best. The second one this week to have such an accident. Brant, one of the men who had laughed as the wine soaked me." A horrifying truth took root in my mind. These were not accidents. They were vengeance. The king, the most feared alpha in the kingdom, was killing for me. The realization poisoned every comfort. I was a curse. I had to see him. I had to understand what I was to him. Mustering every shred of my courage, I walked to the main doors. The guards straightened, hands on their swords. "You cannot pass," one said. I lifted my chin, the timid Omega servant gone, replaced by a girl with nothing left to lose. "He is my king," I said, my voice clear, "and I will speak with him. Stand aside." After a tense moment, I stepped back. My legs felt weak, but I walked on, guided by a reckless need for answers. I found him in his private study, standing before a fireplace, his head bowed. He looked weary and profoundly alone. I stepped inside. He turned, and his golden eyes locked onto mine. The air grew thick with power. "Your Majesty," I whispered. He simply watched me, his gaze intense. I took a step closer. The question I came to ask died on my lips. Replaced by another. "The court whispers that you are nothing like your father. They say he was a good man, a kind alpha." I took another step, empathy overriding my fear. "Was he a good king?" Kaelen went rigid, a storm of pain gathering in his eyes. I braced for his rage, but it never came. Instead, a weary sadness settled over him. "Sit," he commanded, his voice rough. I sat on the edge of a leather armchair. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was haunted. "My father was a good man. He loved my mother with a legendary devotion. He was merciful to his enemies. He swallowed the contents of a glass. And that is precisely why he is dead. He turned to face me, his eyes raw with agony. I was 10 years old. A lord my father had pardoned for treason came to swear a new oath of fealty. The gift he brought was a dagger. He plunged it into my father's heart while my father embraced him. His conspirators cut my mother down before my guards could react. Tears streamed down my face. I watched them die, Kaelen whispered, his voice breaking. I learned the most important lesson of my life that day. I watched them die, Kaelen whispered, his voice breaking. I learned the most important lesson of my life that day. What lesson? I breathed. His eyes met mine, the pain in them a living force. That love is the ultimate weakness. Mercy is a poison. My father was a good man, and his goodness got him slaughtered. I vowed I would be a different king. I would be a monster that no one would dare betray. Because a monster has no weaknesses to exploit. In that moment, I did not see a monster. I saw a terrified boy hiding behind a crown of thorns, building walls around his heart because he was afraid of being hurt again. I stood and walked to him. I reached out and gently touched his arm. The contact sent a jolt through me, a deep, fundamental recognition. My wolf stirred inside with a soft whimper. Kaelen flinched, his eyes wide with shock. "You are wrong," I whispered, my voice filled with conviction. "The strongest fortress is not the one with the highest walls, but the one that houses the most loyal hearts. You have spent your life building walls, Your Majesty, but you have forgotten how to build a home." He stared at me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The storm in his eyes had stilled, replaced by a bewildered ache. The king, the monster, looked lost. In that shared silence, with the fire crackling between us, something shifted. The first fragile brick in the wall between us crumbled to dust. The silence in the study transformed, no longer heavy with dread, but charged with a fragile, nascent energy. My hand remained on his arm, a point of contact, humming with a strange new current. I could feel the coiled strength of the alpha beneath his tunic, but also a faint, telling tremor. He did not pull away. His golden eyes searched mine, and the bewildered ache I found there was a language I knew intimately, the dialect of loneliness. "A home," he repeated. His voice a low, rough echo. He spoke not as a king, but as a man for whom the word had become a forgotten relic. Slowly, deliberately, he covered my hand with his own. His skin was warm, his fingers calloused. The contact sent a stronger jolt through me, a current of pure connection. My breath caught. This was not the brutal grip of Lord Korbin. This was an acknowledgement, a question. "And you believe a king can have such a thing?" he asked. His intense gaze pinning me. After the blood on my hands, the fear I have cultivated, his words were a confession, a glimpse into the gilded cage of his own making. He ruled through fear because he believed it was the only constant. "Is it not a greater strength to inspire loyalty than to command it?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "Is it not a more powerful king who is followed out of love rather than obeyed out of fear?" A shadow crossed his face. "Love is a weapon." My father's love made him blind to the dagger in his friend's hand. Fear is clean. It keeps people in line. It also keeps them at a distance, I countered softly, my thumb moving in a small, unconscious circle on his arm. It keeps you alone in a crowded hall. A monster in the stories they tell. The truth of my words landed with visible weight. He looked away toward the fire, his profile stark in the flickering light. The king was listening to an Omega servant. The world had turned upside down. "The men who hurt you," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, abruptly changing the subject. Yet the connection between us remained a live wire. "They will learn that no one touches what is mine." A possessiveness in his tone should have terrified me. Instead, a different fear bloomed, a fear for him. "Your Majesty, Kaelen," I dared, and the sound of his name felt both forbidden and right. "Please, you must stop. This vengeance is not protection. It is a declaration of war. You are painting a target on my back. They will all see me as a curse." "Let them hate you," he growled, the beast close to the surface. "Let them fear you. It is a far better fate than being your plaything." "No!" The word burst from me with sudden, fierce desperation. "It is not! I do not want to be feared. I do not want to be the reason for more bloodshed. Why does a girl like me matter so much to a king like you? I am nothing." The question that had haunted me since my arrival hung in the air, shimmering with all my fear and confusion. For a moment, I thought the fragile bridge between us would shatter. A brutal war raged behind his eyes. Then he moved with startling speed. His hands rose to cradle my face, his touch surprisingly gentle, despite its urgency. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes blazing with a golden fire that seared my soul. "Why?" he breathed, his words a warm ghost across my lips. "Because from the moment your scent found me in that cesspit of a hall, my soul has known its other half. Because the sound of your heart is the only rhythm mine wants to follow." His confession was not gentle. It was a raw, savage truth, torn from the deepest part of his being. "You are not nothing, Elara," he rasped, his voice thick with a powerful emotion. "You have never been nothing." Then he spoke the words that shattered my world and rebuilt it in a single earth-shattering heartbeat. "You are my mate." Mate. The word echoed in the silence, filled with an impossible, ancient power. It was a myth whispered among Omegas, a dream of a bond that transcended rank. It couldn't be real. But as I stared into his golden eyes, I felt it. A truth itched into my very bones. My wolf, the timid creature I had always hidden, rose up inside me with a clear, resonant howl of joy and belonging. It recognized home. The constant terror in my eyes vanished, replaced by a stunned, wide-eyed wonder. A single tear traced a warm path down my cheek. Kaelen saw the fear leave my eyes, and the change was a greater victory for him than the fall of 1,000 enemies. A fragile, unfamiliar hope bloomed in the barren wasteland of his chest. He did not kiss me. The intensity was channeled into that single, profound point of contact. His forehead against mine, his hands cradling my face as if I were the most precious thing in the world. It was more intimate than any kiss. The moment was shattered by hurried footsteps. Garrick appeared in the doorway, his face grim. He took in the scene, the king and the Omega servant, standing so close. And his eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his professional mask returned. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice urgent. "A situation requires your attention." Kaelen's eyes slid shut, a flicker of frustration and regret crossing his features. The real world was intruding. He slowly, reluctantly pulled away. The loss of his warmth was immediate. "Go back to the sunken palace, Elara," he said, his voice once again that of the king, but with a new, protective undertone. "Garrick will escort you. Do not speak of this." I simply nodded, my mind reeling, my soul singing. As I turned to follow, his voice stopped me. "Elara." I looked back. His golden eyes held mine. A silent promise glowing within them. "No one will ever harm you again. This I swear." I believed him, and that belief was the most terrifying thing of all. The walk back was a blur. My thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind. Mate. The king. Vengeance. It was too much. When the doors of the sunken palace closed behind me, the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of a prison, but of a sanctuary. My sanctuary. I drifted to the large, dusty window and looked out over the moonlit gardens. The world outside was still cruel, but I was no longer the same girl. I was Elara, I was an Omega, and I was the fated mate of the most powerful and feared alpha in the kingdom. A slow smile, born of wonder and a dawning fierce strength, touched my lips. The gain had changed. I was no longer a pawn. I was a queen in the making, and it was time I started acting like one. The days that followed were marked by a surreal peace. The sunken palace transformed from a haunted prison into a cocoon for my rebirth. Fear still resided within me, but it now shared its space with a fragile, burgeoning hope. The word mate echoed in the quiet, a secret melody only I could hear. Morwenna, my stern attendant, seemed to sense the change. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. The trays of food she brought now sometimes included a sprig of fresh jasmine. My scent, the one that had called to Kaelen, it was a silent, telling gesture of approval. I began to explore the library with new purpose, pulling volumes on history, law, and the old wolf packs. I was no longer a passive captive. If I was to be the mate of a king, I needed to understand his world. I needed to become a partner, not just a victim. The guards' whispers became my news. I learned to read the tension in their voices, separating gossip from chilling updates. Another one, a young guard muttered one evening. "Silas, found in the river. They're saying he was drunk." "3 of Korbin's men in as many weeks," his companion replied. Skeptical. "That's not bad luck. That's a purge." My blood ran cold. Silas, another of the laughing warriors. Kaelen was keeping his promise with terrifying efficiency, hunting them down one by one. And with each death, the noose of attention around my own neck tightened. The final news came on a rain-lashed morning. The guards' voices were hushed and urgent. The final news came on a rain-lashed morning. The guards' voices were hushed and urgent. "It's done. The king just stripped Lord Korbin of his command, publicly." On what grounds? Treason. The evidence was compelling. Forged letters, anonymous testimonies, banished him from the capital, stripped of everything. My knees buckled. Korbin was not dead, but this was a social obliteration worse than death for a proud alpha. And it was all because of me. Kaelen had not just avenged me, he had declared a political war on my behalf. The entire court would now trace this ruin back to the humiliated Omega in the sunken palace. I was no longer a secret. I was a catalyst. That night, he came to me. There was no sound. One moment, I was alone in the library, and the next, I felt his presence, a hum of power that raised the hairs on my arms. I turned. He stood in the doorway, dressed in simple, dark clothes, looking more like a warrior than a king. His golden eyes found me, their intensity thrilling and terrifying. "You heard," he stated. I nodded, my throat tight. "Korbin, he will not trouble you again. No one will." "At what cost, Kaelen?" I whispered. "You have made me the reason for a noble's fall. The court will know." "Let them know," he said, his voice low and fierce. "Let them see what happens to those who touch what is mine." "That is not protection," I cried, my composure breaking. "That is putting me on a pedestal for every arrow. They will see me as the key to your downfall and come for me to get to you." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping so close I could feel his body's heat. "Then let them try. I will tear the heart from anyone who dares." We stood locked in a battle of wills. His was the way of the wolf. Possession and brute force. Mine was the way of the heart, strategy, and the subtle art of survival. "You are fighting with fangs and claws," I said, my voice softening as I pleaded with him. "But the most dangerous wars are fought with whispers." "You have silenced Korbin, but you have given his allies a cause, a common enemy. Me." He stared at me, his chest rising and falling, the raw power in him a tangible force. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was a master of the battlefield, but the political arena was a different fight. "What would you have me do, Elara?" he asked, a quiet concession. "Allow such disrespect to go unpunished?" "No," I said firmly. "But do not punish them as a king avenging a servant. Rule them as a king securing his kingdom. Show strength but also wisdom. Show that your justice is fair and serves the pack, not just your personal feelings." He studied me, a new calculating light in his gaze. It was the look of a strategist seeing an unexpected path. "You speak of the heart I told you was a weakness," he murmured. "I speak of a different kind of strength," I countered. "The strength your father lacked." He flinched, but held my gaze. He had a heart, but no sword. You have a sword, Kaelen, a mighty one. But you are afraid to let anyone see you have a heart too. A true king needs both. The silence was profound, broken only by the fire and my frantic heartbeat. I had challenged the very foundation of his rule. Then he did something that stole my breath. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from my cheek. The touch was so tender, so at odds with the fearsome king, that tears pricked my eyes. "Perhaps," he whispered, "I have been fighting with only one hand for far too long." He left as silently as he had come. I stood alone, my skin tingling, my mind reeling from the seismic shift. He had listened. He had heard me as an equal, as his mate. A new resolve solidified within me. I could not hide, a secret to be protected. I was part of this now. The coming war would be fought with whispers, secrets, and politics. And I, Elara, the girl from the kitchens, understood the language of the powerless better than any alpha king ever could. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a heavy volume on noble lineages. I had a war to prepare for, and my first weapon would be knowledge. The shift in Kaelen was subtle, like the first turn of autumn. He didn't visit me again, but his presence was felt in the books that began appearing in the library. No longer random histories, but precise tools of state, economic treatises, grain yield ledgers, a map of noble alliances annotated in his sharp script. He was sharing his kingdom, treating me as a partner. The thought was as daunting as it was thrilling. Morwenna, too, evolved from a silent warden into a strategic guide. Her quiet became purposeful. She would leave a book open to a specific passage about a rebellion that failed due to a lack of popular support, or murmur about a lord whose family had been slighted by Korbin. She was now a spy master, and I was her primary asset. I immersed myself in this new education, cross-referencing ledgers with maps, memorizing the intricate web of noble loyalties and betrayals. I was no longer just Elara. I was a student of power, taught by the realm's most formidable master. A week after our meeting in the library, a new sound echoed outside, the sharp cadence of polished boots. The door opened to reveal Garrick. "The king requests your presence," he announced. In the royal gardens, my heart leaped into my throat. The royal gardens were a public space. This was a statement. Morwenna appeared with a new dress, a deep forest green of impossibly fine fabric, the attire of someone who belonged without needing to announce it. As she helped me into it, she whispered, "Keep your eyes open, girl, and your mind sharper. Sunlight can be just as dangerous as shadow." Garrick led me to a breathtaking walled garden, a hidden paradise where the air was sweet with night blooms. Kaelen stood by a gently gurgling stream. He looked younger in the dappled light. The harsh lines of his face softened. He wore no crown, yet his power was a palpable force, quieting the very air around him. "Elara," he said, my name a soft command. I curtsied. "Your Majesty." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face. "Here there is no majesty, only Kaelen." I joined him by the water, my heart pounding. "I have been considering your counsel," he began, his gaze on a stream. "Lord Korbin's banishment created a vacuum. Fearful wolves are unpredictable, and a unified enemy is deadlier," I finished softly. He glanced at me, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Precisely." He paused. "There is a man, Lord Theron. He was Korbin's second, but his loyalty is to the pack's strength, not to the man. He has a daughter whom Korbin's son shamed. My newly trained mind made the connection. You can offer him Korbin's position and restored honor in exchange for his loyalty." His eyes gleamed with approval, a look more intoxicating than any wine. "But it must be an offer, not a command, a partnership. So I will not go alone. I will go with my mate by my side." The world tilted. What? A show of unity. The king and his Luna meeting a pack member to discuss the future. It shows I am a builder, not just an avenger. That my mate is not a secret, but a part of my rule. It was a brilliant, dangerous move. It would pull me from the shadows into the full glare of the court. "They will say I bewitched you," I whispered. "That I am a lowborn Omega manipulating the throne." Then we will show them otherwise, he said. His voice firm. He reached out, his hand hovering near my arm, his heat a brand. We will show them your grace and intelligence. We will show them why you are worthy of being a queen. His faith was a shield. He wasn't asking for a silent ornament, but a true partner. When? I asked, my voice steady. Tomorrow evening. A private dinner in the Rose Hall. I took a deep breath. Hiding had made me a target. Stepping into the light would make me a different kind of target, but it would also give me a voice. Then I will be ready, I said, lifting my chin. The approval in his eyes was a sun dawning after a long winter. We were no longer king and servant, but two souls bound by fate, stepping onto a chosen battlefield. But then a shadow fell over us. From the garden's arched entrance, a figure watched. Lord Valerius. A cunning beta from a house that had thrived under Korbin. His sharp, calculating eyes took in the intimate scene, the king and the Omega, standing close, speaking with easy familiarity. He didn't look angry or surprised. He looked intrigued, and that was far more dangerous. He offered a shallow bow, his gaze lingering on me a moment too long before he vanished into the corridor. The garden's peace shattered. Our message had been intercepted. Kaelen's body went rigid beside me, the predator reawakening. It begins, he murmured, his voice a low growl. The first move had been made, and we had just revealed our hand to a master player. The triumph of the dinner evaporated. The air in the Rose Hall turning cold and sharp. The messenger's words hung between us like a shroud. The proof of Korbin's corruption, the very ledgers that had secured Lord Theron's loyalty, were now ashes. Kaelen's face was a mask of cold fury. The awe he had looked upon me with moments before had solidified into something harder, more dangerous. A fire, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. How convenient. The watch suspects faulty wiring, sire, the messenger quavered, shrinking under the king's gaze. No watch suspects faulty wiring, sire, the messenger quavered, shrinking under the king's gaze. Does it? Kaelen stated, a world of disbelief in the two words. He dismissed the man with a sharp gesture. The moment the door closed, his golden eyes found mine. The silent communication was instantaneous. This was no accident. This was a counterstrike. Valerius, I breathed, the name a curse. He moves quickly, Kaelen growled. Turning to pace before the dying fire in the hearth, the relaxed strategist from dinner was gone, replaced by the battle-hardened wolf. He understands the power of information. He isn't just trying to discredit you. He's trying to erase the very foundation of our argument. He makes our truth look like a lie built on conveniently destroyed evidence. A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. What do we do? Without those records, Theron could doubt our word. Valerius could claim we fabricated the entire story. We do not retreat, Kaelen said, stopping his pacing to face me. His expression was granite. We advance. He has shown his hand. He fears the alliance we are building, and he fears you. He would not have risked such a bold move otherwise. He strode to the door and summoned Garrick back inside. Triple the guard on the sunken palace. I want a full accounting of every soul who had access to those archives in the last week. And I want a man inside Valerius's household by dawn. Garrick bowed. It will be done, Your Majesty. As Garrick left, Kaelen's focus returned to me. The protective fury in his eyes was a tangible force. This changes our timeline. We cannot wait for them to make the next move. We must solidify our position, and we must do it now. How? I asked, my mind racing, trying to find a new angle in a game where the board had just been set on fire. Tomorrow night, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial low, there is a full moon gathering in the great hall. The entire court will be there. You will be at my side. Not for a private dinner, but for a public declaration. We will not just show them a united front. We will show them an unbreakable one. The thought sent a jolt of pure terror through me. A great hall. The very place of my humiliation, to stand there beside the king before the same lords and ladies who had laughed as wine dripped from my hair. Kaelen saw the fear in my eyes and crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't touch me, but he stood close enough that I could feel the heat of his conviction. This is not a request, Elara, he said, his voice soft but implacable. It is a necessity. Valerius fights with shadows and fire. We must fight with light. We will stand before them all, and we will let them see that their king has chosen his queen. Their whispers will be useless against a truth displayed so boldly. He was right. Hiding was no longer an option. The fire in the archives proved that. The only path left was forward through the heart of the storm. I took a deep, shuddering breath, pushing the memory of the spilled wine. The laughter, the shame, down into a deep, locked part of myself. That girl was gone. She had been burned away in the crucible of the sunken palace and the rose hall. I will be ready, I said, my voice no longer that of a frightened girl, but of a woman claiming her destiny. A grim smile, more a baring of teeth, touched Kaelen's lips. It was the smile of a wolf who had scented the hunt. Good. He left me then, the plans for a very different kind of war already unfolding in his mind. Garrick escorted me back to the sunken palace, but the journey felt different. The stares of the courtiers were no longer just curious. They were calculating, wary, the news of the dinner with Theron. And now the fire would be spreading through the palace like wildfire. I was no longer a spectacle, I was a player, and they were all scrambling to understand the new rules. Morwenna was waiting, her expression grimmer than usual. She had already heard. The wolf circles the flock, she said, by way of greeting, helping me out of the green gown. But he has mistaken the shepherd for a lamb. He tried to burn our proof, I said. My voice tired. Proof is for the uncertain, she retorted, her sharp eyes meeting mine in the mirror. You and the king are the proof now. You must be more than a couple. You must be an idea that cannot be burned. Her words settled in me, a new kind of armor. She was right. Valerius could burn parchment, but he could not burn the look of respect in Lord Theron's eyes. He could not burn the strategic alliance we had forged. He could not burn the bond between me and Kaelen. The next day was a whirlwind of quiet preparation. I did not study ledgers. I sat with Morwenna as she schooled me in the names, faces, and deepest shames of every major lord and lady who would be in attendance. I was not just preparing to be a queen on a king's arm. I was preparing to be a queen who saw the secrets in their eyes. When evening came, the dress Morwenna laid out was not green, nor gray, nor white. It was the color of a deep twilight sky, a blue so dark it was merely black, woven with subtle silver threads that caught the light like scattered stars. It was regal. It was powerful. It was a statement. As she fastened the moonstone around my neck once more, she whispered, "Remember, girl, you are not returning to the scene of your defeat. You are arriving at the site of your coronation." When Garrick came for me, his usual grin expression was touched with something else, a sense of occasion. "The court is assembled, my lady," he said. "The king awaits." We walked not through the secluded corridors, but down the grand central staircase, the heart of the palace. Every step was witnessed. A hushed silence fell in our wake, broken only by the rustle of silk and the soft, determined sound of my footsteps. The doors to the great hall stood before me. Vast and imposing, I could hear the murmur of the crowd within, the same sounds that had once been the backdrop to my nightmare. I paused for one single, steadying breath. I was not the trembling Omega in a wine-stained dress. I was Elara. I was the mate of the king. I felt his presence before I saw him. Kaelen was waiting just inside the doors, a pillar of obsidian and silver in his formal attire. His eyes found mine, and in their golden depths, I saw not just approval, but a fierce, unwavering pride. He offered me his arm. I took it. And together, the king and his queen, we stepped into the light. The victory we had clutched so tightly turned to smoke. As insubstantial as the ashes of the burned archives, Lord Valerius's counterstroke was a masterclass in ruthlessness. He hadn't just challenged us. He had erased the very evidence of our truth. Kaelen stood motionless, a statue of contained fury. The air around him grew heavy and cold. "He dares," he finally spoke, his voice a low, venomous whisper. "He burns the kingdom's memory to hide his own sins." "He knew," I said, the pieces snapping into a terrifying whole. The moment he saw us in the garden, he knew our strategy. He has eyes everywhere, Kaelen, not just in the court, but in the archives themselves. Fear was a cold stone in my gut, but it was quickly buried under a wave of furious resolve. Valerius had tried to make me irrelevant by destroying my tool. He had miscalculated. "This changes nothing with Theron," I stated, my voice firming. "He heard the truth from us. A fire only confirms his enemy's guilt." "To us, it confirms guilt," Kaelen countered, his gaze sharp. "To Theron, it could look like we are covering a lie." "Then we give him proof that cannot burn," I replied. A desperate plan forming. "We give him a witness," I turned to Garrick. "The junior archivists, the scribes who worked in that wing. They saw those records daily. They are the living memory." "They are lowly functionaries." "My lady," Garrick said, his doubt clear. "Their word against the lords?" "Not their word," I interrupted. "Their safety. If one of them were to disappear, it would be another coincidence pointing straight to Valerius." "Find them. Protect them. Publicly, we will make it known the crown is their guardian. We use his own weapons, secrecy and fear, against him, by offering transparency and protection." Kaelen watched me, a storm in his eyes shifting from rage to a spark of grim admiration. He saw a strategy he would never have conceived. To dismantle the web, not just kill the spider. "Do it," Kaelen commanded Garrick. "Bring them to the barracks for questioning. Keep them safe, and ensure Lord Valerius knows." A grim smile touched Garrick's lips. "Understood, Your Majesty." He left, his purpose clear, Alone again, the silence felt different. The battle lines had been redrawn. "He is more dangerous than Korbin," Kaelen murmured, staring out at the night-shrouded city. "Korbin was a club. Belarius is a toxin. He doesn't attack the king. He infects the throne itself." I moved to stand beside him. "Then we must be the antidote. We must be so public, so united for the good of the pack, that his poison finds no host." He looked at me, his expression stark in the moonlight. "You are asking me to be a king I do not know how to be." "You are learning," I said, holding his gaze, "and you are not alone." The truth of that settled between us, a solid, strengthening bond. We were two halves, his might and my insight, forging a new kind of rule. The next day, the palace hummed with the official story of a tragic accident. But beneath the surface, a new current flowed, whispers of the king's sudden interest in lowly scribes. The narrative was shifting from burned paper to the reason for the fire. I did not hide. With Morwenna and my guards, I descended into the palace's heart. I visited the kitchens, the kennels, the gardens. I asked questions. I listened. I was no longer a secret or a pawn on display. I was a presence, the Omega who walked among them, who saw them. The fear in their eyes slowly began to mix with curiosity and a fragile hope. Kaelen, in turn, held open court. His judgments remained firm, but were now publicly reasoned. Rooted in law, not just his will, he was demonstrating the fairness I had advocated. We were building a new story, brick by brick, under the hostile gaze of our enemies. A few days later, an unmarked, folded parchment was delivered to my chambers. I opened it. The handwriting was elegant and chilling. "A tree may be judged by the health of its roots. You look to the branches, little Omega, but the rot you seek lies deeper. Look to the man who tends the garden. Ask him of the Frostfall Accord." My blood turned to ice. The man who tends the garden? The royal gardener, an ancient servant who had served 3 kings, and the Frostfall Accord, a name I had never heard. This was not a threat. It was bait. Valerius was luring me to dig deeper, to question the very foundations of Kaelen's court. He was implying the rot of betrayal went deeper than Korbin, deeper than himself, right to the king's most trusted inner circle. He was trying to sow discord, to plant a seed of doubt in my mind about Kaelen, about Garrick, about everyone. I held the parchment over a candle flame, watching the edges blacken and curl into ash. The physical message was destroyed, but the words were now etched into my mind. Look to the man who tends the garden. The unseen current had just become a riptide, threatening to pull us all into the depths. The anonymous note was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. Its words, "Look to the man who tends the garden. Ask him of the Frostfall Accord," echoed in my mind, a sinister refrain that turned the familiar shadows of the sunken palace into a labyrinth of suspicion. The logical part of me knew this was likely a lie, a trap set by Valerius to breed paranoia between Kaelen and me. But the seed of doubt had been planted. What if it was true? I wrestled with the dilemma for a day. To tell Kaelen would be to give voice to our enemies' insinuations. To withhold it felt like a deeper betrayal of the trust we were building. In the end, the choice was clear. Our unity was our only true advantage. I found him in the war room, his focus on a map of the kingdom. He looked up, and the weariness in his eyes lifted slightly at my approach. "Elara, what is it?" I told him everything, watching his face. I saw the initial flash of anger, then a deep, calculating stillness. "The Frostfall Accord," he repeated, the name unfamiliar on his tongue. His brow furrowed. "And Alaric, he served my grandfather. He was there the day my parents died." A chilling silence fell before he shook his head. "Not betrayal. Not like that. His loyalty is to the crown itself. But the old are keepers of secrets they believe are best forgotten." He made a decision. "We will ask him, together, in private." Under the guise of an evening walk, we found the old gardener Alaric pruning bushes in a secluded corner of the gardens by lantern light. He bowed deeply as we approached. "Rise, Alaric," Kaelen said, his voice low. "We have a question from the past. What do you know of the Frostfall Accord?" The change in the old man was immediate and profound. A color fled his face, and his gnarled hands began to shake. He looked not guilty, but terrified. "Your Majesty, please, that name should never be spoken," he whispered, his voice cracking. It was a dark time. "A necessary evil, your grandfather said, to save the pack. Tell us," I urged gently. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting fearfully. "It was a secret pact, my lady. During the Great Famine, the king made a deal with the Shadowfang pack. They gave us food to prevent starvation. In return," he faltered, overcome with shame. "In return, he promised them a royal bride, your aunt, Princess Anya. The official story was that Princess Anya had died of a fever." Kaelen's stony expression showed he had believed it his entire life. "She refused," Alaric continued, his voice a broken whisper. "She loved another, but the king's word was given. To break it meant war." "So, they found a substitute." A tear traced through the dirt on his cheek. "A common-born Omega, a girl with a passing resemblance, was taken. Her family was paid off. She was dressed in silks and sent north in the princess's place. The accord was fulfilled. The pack was saved. The Frostfall Accord was the name of that shameful treaty. The revelation landed like a physical blow. The heroic tale of his grandfather saving the kingdom was a lie, built on the back of a stolen girl, a life bartered in secret. This was the rot Valerius had hinted at. Not a current conspiracy, but an original sin at the very foundation of the royal family. "Who else knows?" Kaelen's voice was hollow. "Very few, sire." Alaric wept. "Myself I overheard as an apprentice. And Lord Valerius's father. He arranged it all. The connection was made. Valerius had inherited this weapon, a secret that could shatter the myth of the crown's integrity. He wouldn't attack Kaelen as a monster. He would expose him as a hypocrite, the heir to a corrupt legacy. He will use this to turn the people against you," I said, the strategy becoming terrifyingly clear. "He will say the corruption starts at the top." Kaelen dismissed the trembling gardener with a quiet thanks. We were alone in the moonlit garden, the air now thick with the weight of history. The king who had built his reign on being unbending and ruthless now stood on the cracked foundation of his family's greatest sin. The monster was gone, replaced by a man confronting the ghosts in his own bloodline. He looked at the palace, then at me, his gaze clear and resolved. "We do not hide from it," he declared, a new determination in his voice. "We bring it into the light before he can. We control the story." He took my hand, his grip firm. "The time for secrets is over," he said. "It is time for the crown to atone." The revelation of the Frostfall Accord was a poison that seeped into the very stones of the palace. The walk back to Kaelen's study was a funeral procession for the truth we had just unearthed. Inside, the cheerful fire felt like a mockery. "A stolen girl," Kaelen murmured, the words thick with self-directed disgust. He stared into the flames as if he could see the ghost of that betrayed Omega within them. "This is my inheritance, not strength, but cowardice. I built a throne on fear, thinking I was correcting my father's flaw of mercy. But the real weakness was this corruption festering in our past. He wasn't just facing a political enemy. He was confronting the collapse of his own identity. Valerius doesn't just hold a secret." "Elara," he said, his voice hollow. "He holds a key that unlocks every accusation of hypocrisy. If this comes out, the people's trust will shatter. My rule will crumble to dust." I went to him, standing close. My presence a silent pledge that he would not face this alone. "Then we must reveal it first," I said, the idea forming from sheer desperation. He turned, his gaze incredulous. "Announce that my grandfather sold an innocent? It would be a confession that ends my reign." "No," I countered, my voice gaining conviction. "It would be an atonement that begins a new one. You stand before the pack and tell the truth. You condemn your grandfather's act. You publicly repudiate the Accord and all it stood for. You would have me tear down my own family's legacy," he breathed, not in refusal, but in awe at the scale of the proposal. "To build a better one," I insisted. "This is the divide between the old way and the new. The old way is secrets and lies. The new way is truth and integrity. You can be the king who breaks the cycle. You can tell them, my family made a terrible mistake. We traded our honor for survival. But I will not. Our strength will never again be built on the broken back of an Omega." My words hung in the air, a dangerous and radical blueprint for redemption. Kaelen looked at me as if seeing a new constellation in the sky. The anguish in his eyes was slowly replaced by a dawning, fierce resolve. It was the look of a man who had found his true north in the middle of a storm. "They will call me weak," he whispered, voicing his deepest fear. "The weak cling to lies," I replied. "The strong have the courage to face the truth. It is the strongest thing a king could ever do." He took a deep, steadying breath, and I saw the decision lock into place. The weight did not leave him, but he seemed to grow to meet it. "We need proof," he said, his mind shifting to strategy. "Alaric's word is not enough. We need the treaty or a witness. The treaty is surely destroyed." "But the guardsman? The one Princess Anya loved? If he lives—" "Thin," Kaelen said, the name a relic from a buried past. "He and my aunt were sent to Sea Glass Keep." He turned and barked a command to Garrick, who appeared instantly. "Take your most trusted men. Ride for Sea Glass Keep. Find Finn. His safety is paramount. He is the key to the kingdom's future." Garrick bowed and was gone. For 2 days we worked in a state of controlled frenzy. Kaelen and I crafted his speech, a raw confession and a solemn vow. We shared the terrible secret with a handful of trusted lords, securing their stunned but steadfast support. We were building a levee against a tidal wave, praying it would hold. We shared the terrible secret with a handful of trusted lords, securing their stunned but steadfast support. We were building a levee against a tidal wave, praying it would hold. I remained at Kaelen's side. My presence, a constant, living promise of the new world we were trying to build. The court watched, sensing a seismic shift they could not yet name. Then, on the second evening, Garrick returned. He entered the study alone, his face etched with the grim lines of failure. "Garrick, where is Finn?" Kaelen demanded, rising. "We were too late, Your Majesty," Garrick reported, his voice heavy. "He is gone. Royal envoys with impeccable credentials took him 2 days ago." He went willingly. The ground seemed to lurch beneath my feet. Valerius had moved with terrifying speed. Garrick delivered the final crushing blow. And sire, the Princess Anya, she was with him. They have taken her too. Valerius didn't just have a witness. He had the living, breathing heart of the scandal. He had the ultimate proof safely in his grasp. Kaelen sank into his chair, all color draining from his face. Our desperate gambit had been stolen before the first move was made. The spider had not just felt the vibrations, he had seized the prize from the center of the web. We were outmaneuvered completely. Valerius now held the secret, the witnesses, and the power to orchestrate our downfall on his own terms. The night pressed in, heavier and darker than before. The path of redemption was blocked. All that remained was the silence of the tomb. And the wait for the executioner's blow. The silence in the study was a heavy, suffocating shroud. The single ledger lay open on the table, the forged entry a stark admission of Valerius's cunning. We had a target, Blackwater Keep, but it was a fortress, and any overt move would be a death sentence for the hostages. Kaelen's refusal was immediate and absolute. "No, Elara, I will not send you into that viper's nest. It's a suicide mission." "It's the only mission we have," I countered, my voice low but fierce. "They'll never open their gates to your warriors. But for a royal inspection? For the king's curious mate? They'll see arrogance, not a threat. They'll let me in. It is a trap waiting to be sprung. Then we must be smarter than the trap." I stepped closer, my gaze locked with his. "You taught me that power isn't just about strength. It's about perception. Let me use that. Let me be the distraction while your best men find another way in. This isn't just your fight, Kaelen. It's mine. He wants to use the suffering of an Omega to break you. Let an Omega be the one to stop him." The conflict in his eyes was a tempest, the Alpha's primal need to protect, warring with the King's desperate need for a solution. He saw the unwavering resolve in my face. The servant girl forged into a queen in the fires of his court. His shoulders finally slumped, not in defeat, but in grim acceptance. He pulled me into a crushing embrace, his voice a raw whisper against my ear. "If they touch you, I will tear that keep apart, stone by stone, with my bare hands." I held him tightly, drawing courage from his strength. "They won't. We end this now." The plan was set in motion with ruthless efficiency. Dawn, a surprise royal inspection was announced. with me at its head. The official story was my newfound interest in the welfare of the kingdom's remote garrisons, a whim of the king's favored Omega. The courtiers would see it as a bizarre novelty. Valerius would see it as a desperate, foolish gambit. As my small party, a scribe, 2 junior officials, and 4 guards prepared to depart, Kaelen pulled me aside one last time. His golden eyes burned with intensity. Garrick and his team will already be moving. They will scale the cliffs. When you are inside, find a way to create a diversion at the main gate, just a commotion. Nothing more. We will do the rest. I simply nodded, my throat too tight for words. The journey to Blackwater Keep was a blur of tense silence and jolting carriage rides. The keep itself was exactly as described. A grim granite fist of a fortress clinging to a cliff, the sea crashing against the rocks below. The single causeway felt like a bridge to the underworld. As predicted, the gates did not open for an army, but for the king's mate on a frivolous errand. After a tense, prolonged wait, they groaned inward just enough to admit my smy party. The keep's commander, a hulking alpha with Valerius's cold eyes, greeted me with a mocking bow. "My lady, to what do we owe this unexpected honor?" "I was in the area," I said, my voice dripping with a bored, aristocratic tone I had learned from watching the court. "The king wishes to ensure all his garrisons are maintained to the highest standard." "Show me your ledgers and your stores. I do hope this won't take long." I played my part perfectly, the pampered, ignorant Omega, fussing over inventory counts and complaining about the dust. All the while, my eyes scanned every corridor, every guarded door, searching for a sign of the prisoners. Hours ticked by. The commander's initial wariness began to fade into condescending amusement. I was just a silly girl. After all. Then, as we passed a narrow descending staircase guarded by 2 men, I heard it. A faint, muffled cough. A female cough. I stopped, feigning a dizzy spell. "Oh, I feel quite faint," I announced dramatically. Stumbling toward the 2 guards. "You there! Fetch me some water at once!" The guards, confused, looked to their commander. In that moment of hesitation, I accidentally knocked a heavy ledger from my scribe's hands. It crashed to the stone floor with a sound like thunder. "Clumsy fool!" I shrieked, the perfect picture of a hysterical noblewoman. The diversion was small, but it was enough. For a few crucial seconds, all attention was on me and the flustered scribe. From deep within the keep, a different sound echoed, a shout of alarm. Then the sharp, unmistakable ring of steel on steel. Garrick was in. Chaos erupted. The commander's face transformed from smugness to fury. He drew his sword, but it was too late. The main gate, which had been so carefully closed behind us, shuddered under a massive impact from the outside. Kaelen was here. The next minutes were a whirlwind of violence and purpose. I shoved the scribe and officials into a side room as Kaelen's warriors, led by Garrick from within and Kaelen from without, flooded the courtyard. I didn't hide. I ran, following the path I had memorized, down the guarded staircase. I found them in a damp, windowless cell, a weathered man with a guardsman's posture, and beside him, a woman who, despite her age and circumstances, held herself with an innate, tragic grace, Princess Anya. Her eyes, the same shade as Kaelen's, widened in shock as I unlocked the cell. "Who are you?" "I am with the king," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "We're here to bring you home." The fighting was short and brutal. Valerius's men caught between the hammer of Kaelen's force and the anvil of Garrick's. Were swiftly overwhelmed. I emerged from the stairwell, guiding the princess and Finn into a courtyard now controlled by the royal guard. And there, standing amidst the subdued chaos, was Kaelen. His gaze found mine, and the fear and fury in his eyes melted into a relief so profound it stole my breath. He strode forward, ignoring everyone, and his hands came up to cradle my face. "You are unharmed?" he demanded. His voice rough. "I am," I whispered. He didn't kiss me. He simply rested his forehead against mine, a silent testament to a bond that had been tested in fire and had not broken. Then he turned to his aunt. The hardened king was gone, replaced by a nephew seeing a ghost from his past. "And Anya," he said, his voice thick. Tears streamed down her face as she embraced him. "Kaelen, you look so like your father." A journey back to the capital was not a victory parade, but a somber procession. We had the witnesses. We had the truth. But the battle was not over. It had simply changed venues. Now it was time to face the court. As the palace spires came into view, I looked at Kaelen, at the princess, at the truth we now carried. Valerius had sought to bury us with the past. Instead, he had handed us the key to our future. The real game was about to begin. The air in the tower room turned to ice. Lord Valerius stood in the doorway, his presence sucking all the warmth and hope from the space. His smile was a predator's grimace. "Lady Elara," he purred, his voice like silk over a dagger. "I must confess, I anticipated a more subtle ploy from the king who broke Korbin, sending his precious little Omega as a canary into the mine. It's almost poetic." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I stepped instinctively in front of Anya and Finn, my mind racing down a dark, dead-end tunnel. We were caught. The plan had shattered. "You won't get away with this, Valerius," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. "On the contrary," he chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I already have, with the princess and her guardsmen. I hold the key to the kingdom's past, and with you," his cold eyes raked over me, "I hold the key to the king's future. His rage will be magnificent and utterly blinding. He will charge in here without a thought. And he will die for it." He gestured to his guards. "Secure them. The king will be making his entrance shortly, and I want his beloved mate front and center to witness his failure. The king will be making his entrance shortly, and I want his beloved mate front and center to witness his failure." The guards moved forward. My hand flew to the simple moonstone necklace Morwenna had given me. My fingers closing around the cool stone as if it were a talisman. As one of the guards grabbed my arm, I didn't think, I acted. I threw my weight backward, not to break free, but to slam into the small, rickety table by the window. The single heavy clay lantern upon it wobbled precariously. For a horrifying second, I thought it would fall inward, onto the floor. But fate, or the uneven stones, intervened. It teetered on the edge, then tipped outwards through the arched window. Time seemed to slow. I met Valerius's gaze, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of surprise in those calculating eyes. He understood a second too late. The lantern tumbled end over end, a tiny falling star, and shattered on the rocks far below. The flame, however, did not die immediately. For one brilliant fleeting moment, a pool of fire bloomed against the dark. Whetstone, a stark, unmistakable beacon, the signal. Not the clear, safe signal of a lantern in the window, but a signal of distress, a warning. Valerius's face contorted with fury. "You foolish girl. You've just signed his death warrant. He'll rush in now, straight into the ambush." But even as he spat the words, a new sound rose from outside. Not the sound of a frontal assault on the gates, but a series of sharp, guttural cries and the clash of steel from within the keep's courtyard. It was the sound of an ambush being ambushed. Kaelen had seen my signal, and he had understood. The triumphant smirk vanished from Valerius's face. Replaced by a snarl of pure rage, he drew a slender, wicked-looking dagger from his belt. "No matter. I will still have the pleasure of presenting him with your corpse." He lunged for me. But Finn, the old guardsman, moved faster than I thought possible. With a roar that belied his age, he threw himself between Valerius and me, grappling with the Lord. It was a desperate, uneven fight. One of Valerius's guards slammed the hilt of his sword into Finn's head, and the old man crumpled to the floor. Princess Anya screamed. In that moment of chaos, as Valerius turned his enraged attention back to me, a shadow filled the doorway. It was not one of his guards. It was Kaelen. He was splattered with blood, his eyes burning with a feral golden fire. He took in the scene in an instant, me unharmed, Valerius with his dagger, Finn on the ground. He did not speak. He did not roar. He simply moved. It was a blur of controlled, lethal motion. He crossed the room in 2 strides. Valerius barely had time to turn before Kaelen's sword was through his gut. The Lord's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening in a silent gasp. Kaelen leaned in close, his voice a whisper of pure, deadly frost. "You touched what is mine." He twisted the blade and shoved Valerius's body off it with a contemptuous flick. The Lord crumpled to the floor, his life bleeding out onto the cold stones. The remaining guards, seeing their master dead and the king's fury incarnate before them, dropped their weapons and surrendered. The fight was over. Kaelen's gaze found mine, the feral fire in his eyes banked, replaced by a desperate, searching intensity. In 3 strides, he was before me, his hands cupping my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, as if to reassure himself I was real. "You're safe," he breathed, the words a prayer, the lantern. "I had to," I stammered, my body beginning to shake now that the adrenaline was fading. "It was perfect," he interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "It was a queen's move. You didn't just call for help. You warned us. You changed the battle." He didn't kiss me. He simply pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could feel the frantic, steady beat of his heart against my own. In that embrace, surrounded by the evidence of his vengeance and our victory, I felt the last of my fear dissolve. We had faced the spider in his lair, and we had torn his web apart. Lord Valerius filled the doorway. his presence a cold draught of triumph. A thin, cruel smile played on his lips as his guards fanned out behind him. "Lady Elara," he purred, his voice like oil on water. "The king's celebrated weakness." I must confess, I'm disappointed. I expected a more sophisticated gambit from the man who broke Korbin. Sending his heart into the lion's den is recklessly sentimental. I moved to shield Anya and Finn, my pulse thundering in my ears. "This is treason, Valerius." "Treason?" He gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I am preserving the crown's true legacy, a legacy of difficult, necessary decisions. The one your king seems intent on discarding for sentiment." His gaze shifted to Anya. "She understands the cost of survival." "Don't you, Anya?" Princess Anya lifted her chin, a spark of defiance in her weary eyes. "I understood my father's cowardice. There is a difference." Valerius's smile tightened. "Semantics." He turned his predatory focus back to me. "But you are the prize. With you, I don't just have leverage. I have the king's soul in my hands. He will surrender his throne to keep you safe." Proving his strength was always a facade built on a servant thurl. He saw me as a tool, a vulnerability. He couldn't comprehend the partnership we had forged. "You misjudge us both," I said, a strange calm descending over me. "I think not," he sneered. "He is a beast playing at being civilized. And you are a mouse pretending to be a wolf." He signaled his guards. "Take them to the dungeons. It's time to negotiate with the king." As the guards stepped forward, a shout echoed from below, followed by the brutal music of combat. Steel ringing, men crying out. The sound came from within the keep's walls. Valerius's smugness shattered. "What is this?" The brawl grew louder, closer. One of his men staggered into the room, bloodied. "My lord!" "They're inside. They scaled the cliffs." "Impossible!" Valerius snarled. In that instant of distraction, Finn moved. Seizing a heavy iron candlestick, he swung it with a soldier's precision, dropping one guard. The room erupted into chaos. I pushed Anya into the corner as Finn bravely held off two more guards. The remaining two came for me. Unarmed and untrained, I had only desperation. I ducked a grab and threw a wild elbow. Catching one man in the throat, he stumbled back, choking. Valerius watched, his fury crystallizing. He drew a slender, cruel dagger. His target was clear. Me. "The asset must be secured," he hissed, and lunged. Time stretched. The blade gleamed. There was no escape. Then a shadow blotted out the doorway. Kaelen. He was a storm of controlled violence. In 2 strides, he was across the room. He didn't parry. He smashed his forearm into Valerius's wrist. Bone snapped. The dagger clattered to the floor. Valerius cried out, clutching his injury. Kaelen didn't stop. He seized the lord by his tunic and slammed him against the stone wall, pinning him. The remaining guards, seeing their master captured, froze. "You threaten my mate," Kaelen growled, his voice a low, deadly vibration. His eyes burned with feral gold fire. Valerius, through his pain, bared his teeth in a grimace. "Do it. Be the monster you are. Prove me right." I saw the war in Kaelen's face. The beast's hunger for vengeance warring with the king's need for justice. "Kaelen, don't," I said softly. He glanced at me. the rage in his eyes battling the reason I represented. Valerius laughed, a pained, wet sound. "Listen to the mouse, your majesty. How you've fallen." Kaelen's grip tightened. He leaned in, his face inches from his enemies. "You are wrong," Kaelen whispered, the words cold and absolute. "She is my strength, and you will not die a martyr. You will stand trial. You will face the pack you betrayed and answer for every crime. Your poison will be exposed to the light." The defiance in Valerius's eyes finally broke, replaced by dread. A public trial and disgrace were a far crueler end for a Shadow King than a warrior's death. Kaelen shoved him away, and Garrick swiftly clamped irons on the Lord's wrists. Silence fell, heavy and profound, broken only by the distant sea. Kaelen turned to me. In 2 steps, he was before me, his hands cradling my face, his eyes desperately searching mine. "Elara," he breathed, my name a sigh of profound relief. "I'm unharmed," I whispered, covering his hands with my own. He pulled me into an embrace, his arms locking around me like a fortress. I felt the violent hammering of his heart, the tremor of fear that had not yet left him. He had faced his enemy and chosen the path of a ruler, not a killer. Over his shoulder, I saw Princess Anya watching us, her hand in Finn's. Tears traced paths through the dust on her cheeks, but they were tears of hope. She was seeing the man her nephew had become. The immediate threat was over. The web was torn, but as I held Kaelen, I knew the true battle, the fight for the soul of his kingdom, was only now beginning. The return to the capital was not a victory parade, but a procession of profound consequence. Lord Valerius, bound and defeated, was a dark stain at the center of our column. Princess Anya and Finn traveled in a sheltered carriage, their intertwined hands and silent tears speaking of a long exile finally ending. Kaelen and I rode at the front, the weight of the coming storm a shared burden between us. The rigid, isolated king was gone, replaced by a man who had stared into his family's darkest secret and chosen to build something new. The city greeted us with a watchful, heavy silence. The people lined the streets, their faces etched with curiosity and a fragile, hesitant hope. They had heard the rumors of a changed king, and now they watched for proof. In the grand courtyard, the assembled court was a sea of stunned faces. They saw the captured traitor, the returned princess, and me, the Omega, no longer hidden, riding proudly beside the king. Kaelen did not dismount. His voice, clear and commanding, cut through the silence. The traitor Valerius will face a public trial for his crimes. The time for secrets is over. The time for justice begins now. It was a declaration and a challenge. He then helped me from my horse, a simple, powerful gesture of partnership before the entire court, before turning to escort his aunt with solemn reverence. The message was undeniable. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. We worked not just to build a case for the trial, but to prepare for the seismic revelation it would bring. The Frostfall Accord must be part of the testimony, Kaelen stated in a strategy session. His resolve firm. Valerius will try to wield it as a weapon. We will disarm him by confessing it first. Lord Farron looked concerned. It will shake the people's faith, Your Majesty. Faith built on a lie is worthless, I said. My voice steady. We are not breaking the foundation. We are repairing it with truth. Faith built on a lie is worthless, I said, my voice steady. We are not breaking the foundation. We are repairing it with truth. Kaelen's hand found mine under the table, a brief, solidifying squeeze. We control the narrative. We confess the sin before we are accused of it. The night before the trial, I found him in the royal gardens, staring into the dark water of the stream. You carry the weight of your ancestors tonight, I said softly. He sighed, the sound heavy with history. My father ruled with a heart and was betrayed. My grandfather ruled with calculation and committed an atrocity. I walk a line between them, and I fear the fall. He turned to me, his gaze vulnerable. What if this confession destroys it all? I took his hand. A kingdom of secrets is a house of cards. A kingdom of truth is a fortress. You are not them, Kaelen. You are the king who looked into the darkness and chose the light. That is why they will follow you. He lifted our joined hands, his voice a low murmur. I could not do this without you. You are my compass. We stood in silence, drawing strength from one another. Two halves weighed whole against the coming tempest. The great hall was packed, the air thick with anticipation. I sat beside the empty throne, with Princess Anya and Finn nearby. Kaelen entered, wearing a simple silver circlet instead of the iron crown. He took his throne and nodded. Lord Valerius was brought in, his defiance a thin veneer over his panic. The charges were read. I acted to save this kingdom from a soft king who values a servant above our ancient laws, Valerius proclaimed. Ancient laws? Kaelen's voice, calm and clear, silenced the room. You speak of the Frostfall Accord. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Valerius stared, stunned. I know of it, Kaelen continued. Rising, he paced before them, his voice carrying to every ear. I know of the treaty my grandfather made during the Great Famine. I know he promised a royal bride to the Shadowfang pack for food. And I know, his voice dropped, filled with sorrow, that when his daughter refused, he sent a substitute, a common-born Omega girl, her life bartered away for a lie. A unified gasp of horror filled the hall. The secret was free. Kaelen turned, his expression one of raw honesty. Is this the honorable past you wish to return to, Valerius? A past built on the betrayal of our most vulnerable? Family committed a great wrong. A sin that has festered too long. He gestured to his aunt. The true princess was forced into exile. The stolen Omega's name is lost, but her sacrifice will be remembered. I cannot change the past, but I will atone for it. He fixed his blazing gaze on Valerius. You did not act to save the kingdom. You acted to preserve a system of secrets and corruption. You are not a defender of tradition. You are a parasite, feeding on its rot. Valerius stood defeated, his weapon shattered. Kaelen looked out at the stunned court. The old way ends today. This trial is for the soul of our pack. I choose a new way, a way of light and truth. Who will stand with me? The silence held for a breath. Then Lord Theron rose. I will stand with my king. One by one the court rose. A rising tide of support, not born of fear, but of hope. The crown was no longer a chain. It was a promise. And Kaelen, with the truth as his shield and his mate by his side, was finally, Truly, the king he was born to be. The silence in the great hall broke into a roar, not of anger, but of collective release. Kaelen's confession had not shattered his authority. It had forged a new, deeper bond with his people. Lord Valerius stood deflated, his power gone, his poisonous narrative dissolved. The trial that followed was swift. Stripped of his secrets, Valerius was condemned for his crimes of kidnapping and treason. His sentence, exiled to the frozen northern wastes from which his family's original sin had sprung, was a fitting end. A new energy hummed through the capital in the days that followed. The air felt lighter. The whispers in the streets were now of hope, of the king's integrity, and of a future being rebuilt. My place was no longer at the edges, but at the center. I was Lady Elara, the king's acknowledged mate and advisor. I held my own courts, listening to the people Kaelen's old regime had overlooked. The knowledge I gained in the sunken palace became a tool for crafting fair trade policies and agricultural reforms. We ruled as partners. He was the kingdom's shield, and I was its heart. One evening, he found me in the library, reviewing plans for a public school, my latest project. "You work too late," he murmured. His voice soft. "The foundation is set," I replied, looking up with a smile. "Now we build." He stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders as he studied the drawings. "A school for all children," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "A pack is only as strong as its least educated member," I reminded him. He was quiet for a moment. "My father would have loved this," he said, his voice thick. "I was so busy running from his legacy. I forgot to honor the good in it." I covered his hand with mine. "You are not just his son, Kaelen. You have taken his compassion and your own strength to create something entirely new." He turned me to face him, his expression solemn. He knelt, taking my hands in his. The gesture was so humble it stole my breath. "This new era is ours," he said, his golden eyes holding mine. "But it is not enough for you to be my mate in practice. I want you to be my queen in truth, in the eyes of the gods and the entire pack." He took a breath. "I am not asking as your king. I am asking as the man whose soul found its other half in a hall of cruelty. Will you rule by my side as my wife and my queen forever?" Tears filled my eyes. There were no jewels or proclamations, just a man offering his heart and his kingdom. "Yes," I breathed, my voice sure. "Yes." "Kaelen, I will." He rose and pulled me into an embrace that felt like a final, long-awaited homecoming. The last of his walls crumbled away, leaving only the man and his love for me. The coronation was held at the next full moon. The grand hall, once the site of my deepest shame, was now filled with joyous faces from every corner of the kingdom. The grand hall, once the site of my deepest shame, was now filled with joyous faces from every corner of the kingdom. I walked toward Kaelen, who waited for me wearing a simple silver circlet. His eyes held only love. We spoke the ancient vows as equals, as mates. When the high priestess declared us bound, she placed a second circlet on my brow, a band of moonlight silver and moonstones, a match to the king's. "I present to you," her voice rang out, "your king, Kaelen, and your queen, Elara. The cheer that shook the hall was deafening, but it was the unified, joyous howl from the crowd outside that truly heralded the start of our reign. We turned to face our people. Hand in hand, the monster and the servant were gone. In their place stood a king and queen, their crowns gleaming in the sun, ready to lead their pack into a new dawn. The girl they had once poured wine on was now their queen. And her king, the most feared alpha in the land, looked at her as if she had hung the moon and stars. Our story was no longer about survival. It was about our legacy, and it was only just beginning. The roar of the crowd was a living tide of sound, warm and overwhelming. It was not the fearful silence of Kaelen's old court, nor the cruel laughter of my caste. This was the joyous, unified heartbeat of a pack reborn. The cheers inside the hall merged with a deep, primal howl from the city beyond, a vow of loyalty that resonated in our very souls. Kaelen's hand tightened around mine. His gaze was not on the crowd, but on me, his golden eyes shining with a love that felt more solid than the crown on my head. The silver circlet felt not like a weight, but like a part of me, a symbol of a destiny I had never imagined. "My queen," he murmured, the words a private vow. "My king," I whispered back, my heart overflowing. Together we turned to our people. I saw Lord Theron, standing proud, Morwenna, her stern face softened by tears, and the common folk, their eyes alight with a hope that outshone the palace lights. Kaelen raised our joined hands, and the whole fell silent. For too long, his voice rang out. This crown has meant fear, secrets, and division. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. That ends today. This crown, he gestured to his circlet, and this one, he said, his voice softening as he looked at mine, will now stand for unity, truth, and a strength built on trust. Not fear. He looked at me, his certainty a tangible force. Queen Elara and I promise you an honest reign. We will lead with both strength and compassion. In this kingdom, every wolf, alpha, beta, and omega, has a voice and has value. A new wave of cheers, more passionate than the first, shook the hall. This was the change they had longed for. Not just new rulers, but a new heart. The celebrations lasted for days. The palace gates stood open. We walked among our people, Nuz distant monarchs, but as their Alpha and Luna. Children gave me flowers, and seasoned warriors greeted Kaelen with a respect that ran deeper than fear. During the feasting, Princess Anya found me. "He has his mother's heart and his father's courage," she said, watching Kaelen listen to a group of farmers. "But the man he is now is because of you, Elara." "He had it in him all along," I said, my heart swelling with pride as I watched my husband. "He just needed someone to believe it." "He needed you," she corrected gently. "You are his true north. Never forget that." On the third night, under a full moon, the crowd's chant began, a rhythmic, thunderous demand. "How? How? How?" It was the ancient ritual, the unified cry of the pack, neglected for years of fear and division. Kaelen looked to me, a question in his eyes. This was an alpha's duty, but we were partners. He offered his hand, and we walked to the highest balcony, overlooking the thousands gathered in the courtyard. The night grew still, Heavy with anticipation, Kaelen threw back his head, and a deep, powerful howl tore from his throat, the sound of a king claiming his mate, his family, his pack. It was a cry of protection, pride, and joy. As his voice faded, I drew breath. I was an Omega. My howl would not be one of dominance, but of unity, healing, and love. I lifted my face to the moon and sang out. My voice was a clear, melodic thread weaving around the echo of his, the sound of the pack's heart, the quiet strength that had survived in shadows. Then the pack answered. 1,000 voices rose as one, a symphony of alphas, betas, and omegas. The sound was a physical force shaking the palace stones. It was not submission, but union. We were one pack, one family, under one moon. As the last echoes faded, Kaelen held me close. We looked out at our kingdom, at the sea of loyal faces and the city lights like a field of stars. The path here had been paved with shatter, secrets, and fire, but it led us to this dawn. "It is a good beginning," Kaelen murmured against my hair. I leaned into his strength, my heart full. The girl who was nothing was now a queen. The king, who was a monster, was now a beloved leader. Our story was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. It was ours. And as the new moon rose over a united kingdom, we stood together, ready for whatever came next, side by side.